The morning sun had barely crested the horizon when Marcus Chen pulled into the empty parking lot of Riverside Trail. He'd driven 40 minutes from the city, desperate for solitude after a grueling week at the hospital. As an emergency room physician, Marcus had spent the last 7 days dealing with back-to-back shifts, impossible decisions, and the kind of emotional exhaustion that settles deep into your bones. This hike was supposed to be his therapy, his escape, his chance to breathe. He locked his car, adjusted his backpack, and started down the trail. The air smelled of pine and morning dew. Birds called from the canopy above. For the first time in days, about 20 minutes into his hike, Marcus heard it, a sound that made him stop dead in his tracks. It wasn't the normal forest noise, the rustle of leaves or the chatter of squirrels. This was different. This was desperate. A high-pitched whimpering that seemed to come from somewhere off the trail, down near the creek bed. Marcus stood perfectly still, listening. There it was again, more insistent this time, more pleading. He'd heard enough sounds of distress in his career to recognize genuine suffering when he heard it. Without thinking, he left the marked trail and began making his way carefully down the rocky slope toward the water. The whimpering grew louder, and then Marcus saw him, a small German Shepherd puppy, maybe 3 or 4 months old, standing on a narrow ledge about 15 feet above the rushing creek. The puppy's front right paw was caught in what looked like an old wire fence that had partially collapsed into the ravine. Every time the puppy tried to move, the wire tightened, causing him to cry out in pain. But what struck Marcus most wasn't the puppy's predicament. It was his eyes. The moment that puppy saw Marcus, he locked eyes with him, and the whimpering changed. It became more focused, more directed. The puppy wasn't just crying out in pain anymore. He was calling for help. He was begging Marcus, specifically, to save him. Marcus's medical training kicked in immediately. He assessed the situation with the same clinical precision he used in the ER. The ledge was narrow and unstable. One wrong move, and both of them could end up in the fast-moving creek below. The wire looked rusted and sharp. The puppy was clearly exhausted, probably had been trapped for hours, maybe all night. And judging by the puppy's frantic expression and the way he kept looking between Marcus and his trapped paw, time was running out. "Okay, buddy," Marcus called down, his voice steady and calm. "I see you. I'm going to help you. Just stay still for me, all right?" The puppy seemed to understand. He stopped struggling and fixed his eyes on Marcus with an intensity that was almost human. It was as if the puppy knew that this stranger. Marcus began to carefully descend toward the ledge. The rocks were loose and slick with morning moisture. Every step had to be calculated. He used exposed tree roots as handholds, testing each one before putting his weight on it. His heart pounded in his chest, but his hands remained steady. He'd spent years training to stay calm under pressure, and now that training was being put to a test he never anticipated. As he got closer, Marcus could see the full extent of the problem. The wire wasn't just wrapped around the puppy's paw. It was part of a larger tangle of old fencing that had been there for years, probably left over from some abandoned property line. The puppy had somehow gotten himself into the middle of it, and in his panic to escape, had only made things worse. But before we continue our story, let's pause for a moment and invite you to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. All done? Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Your support is what helps our channel grow. Let's continue. Easy now, Marcus murmured as he finally reached the ledge. He had to lie flat on his stomach to distribute his weight evenly. The ledge creaked ominously beneath him. The puppy whimpered but didn't move, his dark eyes never leaving Marcus's face. Marcus reached out slowly, letting the puppy smell his hand first. The puppy's nose was wet and cold. Despite his fear and pain, the puppy licked Marcus's fingers, a small gesture of trust that nearly broke Marcus's heart. "You're a brave one, aren't you?" Marcus whispered. "Let's get you out of this mess." The wire was wrapped tightly around the puppy's paw, and Marcus could see it had already started to cut into the skin. Not deep enough to be life-threatening, but enough to cause significant pain. He needed to work quickly, but carefully. One false move, and he could either hurt the puppy more or lose his own precarious balance on the ledge. Marcus pulled out his multi-tool from his pocket. He always carried it on hikes, a habit from his Boy Scout days. He extended the wire cutters and began to work. The puppy tensed, but remained remarkably still, as if he understood that Marcus was trying to help. The first wire sapped with a sharp ping. The puppy flinched, but didn't pull away. Marcus worked on the second wire, his fingers moving with surgical precision. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool morning air. The ledge shifted slightly beneath him, sending small rocks cascading down into the creek below. "Almost there, buddy. Just one more." The third and final wire was the trickiest. It was wound around the puppy's paw in such a way that Marcus had to get dangerously close to the skin to cut it without causing injury. He held his breath, positioned the cutter, and squeezed. The wire snapped. The puppy was free, but Marcus's relief lasted only a split second. In his excitement at being freed, the puppy lunged forward toward Marcus, losing his footing on the narrow ledge. Marcus's reflexes took over. He dropped the multi-tool and grabbed the puppy with both hands, pulling him close to his chest. But the sudden movement was too much for the unstable ledge. Marcus felt the rock beneath him give way. For a terrifying moment, he was sliding backward toward the creek. The puppy clutched tightly in his arms. His mind raced through the possibilities, all of them bad. But his free hand shot out and caught hold of a thick tree root protruding from the bank. His shoulder screamed in protest as it took the full weight of both him and the puppy. But the root held. For several long seconds, Marcus hung there, one hand gripping the root, the other holding the trembling puppy against his chest, his feet dangling above the rushing water. The puppy had gone completely still, as if he understood that any movement could be disastrous. Marcus's training had prepared him for a lot of things, but dangling from a cliff face while holding a puppy wasn't something they'd covered in medical school. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to think clearly. He needed to get a better grip, to find somewhere to place his feet, to pull himself and the puppy to safety. Slowly, carefully, Marcus began to work his way back up. He found a foothold on a small outcropping of rock. He shifted inch by inch. Marcus climbed. His right arm burned with the effort. His legs shook from the strain. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. This puppy had begged him for help, had trusted him completely, and Marcus was not about to let him down. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 2 or 3 minutes, Marcus finally pulled himself and the puppy up onto more stable ground. He lay there for a moment, his chest heaving, the puppy still clutched in his arm. Then the puppy shifted and began licking Marcus's face with such enthusiasm and gratitude that Marcus couldn't help but laugh, despite his exhaustion. Okay, you're welcome," Marcus said, sitting up and gently setting the puppy down on solid ground. The puppy immediately pressed against Marcus's leg, as if afraid to be. Marcus examined the puppy more carefully now. Besides the injury to his paw, which was bleeding slightly but not seriously, the puppy appeared to be in relatively good shape. He was thin, definitely hungry, but his eyes were bright and alert. His coat, though dirty, seemed healthy underneath the grime. This wasn't a stray that had been living rough for months. This was a puppy who had gotten lost recently. "Where's your family, little guy?" Marcus asked, checking the puppy's neck for a collar. Nothing. No tags, no identification, no way to know where he'd come from. Marcus pulled out his phone, but of course there was no signal this deep in the canyon. He'd have to hike back up to the trailhead to call anyone. But first, he needed to tend to the puppy's paw. He pulled out his first aid kit and carefully cleaned the wound. The puppy whimpered, but held still, seeming to understand that Marcus was helping him. "You're being very brave," Marcus said softly as he wrapped the paw in gauze. "Much braver than some of my patients." The puppy looked up at him with those soulful eyes, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest. He'd seen a lot in his years as an ER doctor. He'd saved lives, lost lives, and everything in between. But there was something about this moment, this connection with this small, helpless creature who had begged him for help, that touched something deep inside him. Once the paw was bandaged, Marcus carefully lifted the puppy and placed him inside his backpack, with just his head sticking out. "Sorry, buddy, but you're not walking on that paw. You're getting the VIP treatment back to civilization." When they finally reached the parking lot, Marcus immediately checked his phone. Signal restored. He started making calls. First to the local animal shelter, then to the park ranger station. Yes, there had been reports of a missing German Shepherd puppy. A family had been camping in the area 2 days ago, and their puppy had run off chasing a rabbit. They'd been searching frantically ever since. Marcus gave his contact information and described where he'd found the puppy. The ranger said the family would be contacted immediately. While they waited, Marcus drove to a nearby convenience store and bought some water and dog food. The puppy devoured the food like he hadn't eaten in days, which he probably hadn't. As Marcus sat in his car, watching the puppy eat, he found himself thinking about the randomness of the morning. He'd come out here to escape, to be alone, to process his own stress and exhaustion. Instead, he'd been put in a position where someone, something, needed him desperately. And he'd been able to help. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he'd made a clear, uncomplicated difference. About an hour later, a car pulled up next to Marcus's. A family rushed out. A mother, father, and 2 young children. The moment they saw the puppy, they burst into tears. The puppy, for his part, went absolutely crazy with joy, his tail wagging so hard his entire body shook. "You found him! You found Max!" the mother cried, kneeling. "I can't thank you enough," the father said, shaking Marcus's hand vigorously. "We thought we'd lost him. We've been searching non-stop. Where did you find him?" Marcus explained the situation, describing the precarious ledge and the wire trap. The family listened in horror, realizing how close they'd come to losing their beloved pet forever. "He begged me for help," Marcus said simply. "I couldn't just walk away." What Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that this moment was being recorded. One of the park rangers, upon hearing about the rescue, had come to document the reunion. The ranger had started filming from a distance, capturing the emotional scene as the family was reunited with their puppy. The ranger was so moved by the story and the reunion that he later posted the video on social media with Marcus's permission. The video went viral within days. Millions of people watched as Marcus described finding the trapped puppy and risking his own safety to save him. They watched the puppy, Max, enthusiastically licking Marcus's face in gratitude. They watched the family's emotional reunion. Comments poured in from around the world, praising Marcus's bravery and compassion. But the story didn't end there. The publicity surrounding the video had unexpected consequences. A hospital where Marcus worked received hundreds of messages thanking them for employing such a compassionate physician. Local news stations wanted interviews, but more importantly, the video inspired a wave of adoptions at local animal shelters. People who saw the video were moved to give rescue animals. Marcus himself was overwhelmed by the response. He'd simply done what felt right in the moment. He hadn't expected recognition or praise. But as he read through some of the comments and messages, he realized that people weren't just responding to the rescue itself. They were responding to the connection. That moment when Max had looked into his eyes and begged for help, and Marcus had answered that call. Several weeks later, Marcus received a surprise package. Inside was a beautiful photo of Max, now fully healed, playing in his family's backyard. With it was a letter from the family, thanking Marcus again and inviting him to visit anytime. They'd also included something else, a certificate showing that they'd made a substantial donation in Marcus's name to a local animal rescue organization. But perhaps the most unexpected outcome came from the hospital. The viral video had shown Marcus at his best, embodying the compassion and courage that the medical profession should represent. The hospital administration created a new program in his honor. the Marcus Chen Compassion Award, given annually to a staff member who goes above and beyond in showing care and empathy to those in need. Marcus kept that photo of Max on his desk at the hospital. On particularly difficult days, when he felt the weight of his responsibilities becoming too heavy, he'd look at that photo and remember the morning when a small puppy begged him for help, and he'd been able to answer that call. It reminded him why he'd become a doctor in the first place, not for recognition or praise, but for those moments when someone needs help, and you have the ability. The puppy had begged a man for help. What the man did next shocked everyone, not because it was extraordinary in the sense of being superhuman, but because it reminded people of something fundamental: that compassion, courage, and the willingness to help those in need are choices we make every single day. Marcus had simply chosen to help when help was needed most, and in doing so, he'd reminded millions of people about the power of that simple choice. Max, for his part, grew into a strong, healthy German shepherd who, according to his family, never forgot the man who saved him. Whenever Marcus visited, Max would greet him with special enthusiasm, as if to say thank you over and over again. And Marcus would kneel down, scratch behind Max's ears, and think about how a morning that started as an escape. Sometimes the most important moments in our lives come when we least expect them. Sometimes they come in the form of a small puppy trapped on a ledge, begging for help. And sometimes, if we're lucky, we're able to answer that call and make a difference that ripples out in ways we could never anticipate. That's what Marcus did. And that's why, when that puppy begged for help, what this man did next truly shocked everyone. Not through spectacle, but through simple, rational act. Profound humanity. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories of compassion and courage. And don't forget to leave a comment below telling us about a time when you helped someone in need, or when someone helped you. Your stories matter, and we'd love to hear them. Thank you for watching, and remember, the world needs more people willing to answer the call when help is needed.